If you've ever watched a top student freeze on a simple why question, you've seen the problem. High scores can hide shallow learning. In my first year of college, there was a guy everyone copied. His notes were color-coded, his flashcards had categories, subcategories, and perfect definitions. Before tests, he'd walk around saying, "This chapter is easy," and people believed him. One afternoon, our instructor did something unfair. She didn't ask for a definition. She asked, "Explain the idea like you're talking to your younger cousin." No technical words. He smiled, started fast, and then slowed down. He repeated the textbook sentence with different emphasis, like rearranging furniture would change the house. After 10 seconds, his voice rose. After 20, he laughed and said, "I know it, I just can't explain it." That sentence is the straight A illusion. School trains you to win a particular game, recognize the right pattern, reproduce the right phrasing, collect points. Memorization is the weapon of that game. It feels productive because you can measure it, pages covered, cards reviewed, hours spent. But memorization and understanding are not the same thing. Memorization is when you can repeat the label. Understanding is when you can use the idea when the label disappears. Memorization is fragile. It depends on the question looking familiar, the stress staying low, and the context matching the way you studied. Twist the wording, combine two topics, ask for an example, or ask you to predict what happens next, and the knowledge wobbles. Understanding is flexible. It travels. It survives new formats, pressure and time, because it's connected to meaning. Here's the contrast that matters. Top students often build a library of sentences. Real learners build a map. A library is impressive. But if you don't know where anything connects, you can still get lost. A map is smaller, but it tells you where you are and how to move. This video is not about studying harder, it's about studying differently. So you stop confusing familiarity with skill. I'm going to give you a method that replaces "I can repeat it" with "I can explain it, apply it, and adapt it." We'll build it in 3 parts, a quick way to expose fake understanding, the reason memorization collapses under pressure, and a simple system that turns any topic into something you actually own. Before we do any of that, run this 10-second self-check. Pick one concept you know. Now answer 3 questions without looking at your notes. Can I explain it using only everyday words? Can I give a real example from my life, not the textbook? If someone disagreed, could I say what they're missing? If that feels uncomfortable, good. That discomfort isn't failure, it's honesty. And honesty is the doorway to real learning because it shows you exactly where the fog is. Next, we're going to expose the hidden rules school rewards, why memorizing feels like progress, and how to stop playing that game without falling behind. The easiest way to get good grades is to become a professional recognizer. You recognize the chapter headings. You recognize the important words. You recognize the shape of last year's questions. And because recognition feels smooth, your brain whispers, "I understand this." But recognition is not understanding. Recognition is just familiarity wearing a lab coat. School quietly trains that confusion. It rewards the student who can say the right sentence, even if they don't know what the sentence is pointing to. In other words, it teaches labels, not meaning. I saw this clearly the first time I helped a friend study economics. He could recite a perfect definition of opportunity cost. Every phrase was correct. If you asked him to write it on an exam, he'd get full marks. So I asked a different question. What's the opportunity cost of spending 3 hours scrolling tonight? He stared at me like I'd changed the subject. He wasn't stupid. He was trained. He had learned the label, not the idea. That's the big contrast. Memorization stores words. Understanding stores relationships. Words are cheap. Relationships are useful. And the system pushes you toward the cheap version because it's easier to test. A worksheet can check a definition. A multiple-choice exam can reward keyword recognition. A rubric can give points for mentioning the correct terms. Meaning is harder to grade, so it gets replaced with proxies, vocabulary, speed, neatness, confidence. Which creates another contrast that most students never notice. School often measures performance in a format, not competence in reality. Here are 3 ways the label game shows up in real studying. 1. Keyword hunting. You stop asking "what is this" and start asking "what do they want me to say?" You memorize phrases that look impressive. You write them down exactly as the teacher said them because you've learned that your own words are risky. The tragedy is that you can get an A while staying confused as long as your confusion is wrapped in the right terminology. 2. Template thinking. You learn the shape of an answer, definition, then 3 bullet points, then a conclusion. The structure is useful, but it becomes a hiding place. You can produce a beautiful paragraph that contains no working model. It's like drawing a perfect map legend without drawing the map. 3. Passive review. You reread notes until they feel familiar. You highlight. You rewrite. You watch the same lecture again at 1.5x speed. It feels like work, and it is work, but it's mostly input. You're feeding your brain and mistaking fullness for strength. Contrast frame input makes you feel prepared. Output proves you're prepared. If your studying is mostly input, you may feel confident right up until someone asks for output. Explain it, use it, predict what happens, solve a new problem. That's when the illusion breaks. So we need a fast way to expose whether you've learned meaning or just labels without waiting for an exam to embarrass you. Here's a simple diagnostic you can run on any topic in 2 minutes. The label to meaning test. Pick one concept you know and answer these 4 prompts out loud in plain language. What is it? Explain it without using the textbook's vocabulary. What is it not? Name one common confusion and why it's wrong. Why does it matter? What does this idea help you predict or decide? Give a real example, not a copied example. One from your life, news, work, sports, anything. If you struggle, don't punish yourself. You just located the exact point where your learning is thin. That's a gift because now you have something real to build. One more question makes the test even sharper. If I had to teach this tomorrow, what would I draw on a blank page? If the answer is nothing, you probably have vocabulary, not structure. This is why so many top students feel secretly anxious. They can play the label game, but they sense it's fragile. They know the grade depends on the test staying predictable. And now we arrive at the uncomfortable part. Even when memorization works, it tends to fail under pressure when questions twist, time is short, and stress is high. In the next section, I'll show you exactly why that happens and how to tell whether what you're learning will survive when the exam stops being polite. Memorization usually doesn't break when you're relaxed. It breaks when you're timed, watched, tired, or scared. That's why some students look brilliant in homework and harmless quizzes and suddenly crash in the exam that actually matters. It's not because they became less intelligent in that room. It's because memorization is built on cues, and pressure changes the cues. I once tutored a student who was top of the class in biology. He had immaculate notes and an answer for every definition. If I said define osmosis, he'd fire it back instantly. If I said define diffusion, same thing. He looked unstoppable. Then I asked a question that wasn't on his cards. Why do your fingers wrinkle after a long bath? He blinked, smiled politely, and started repeating the definition of osmosis. The words were correct, but they didn't connect to the situation. He wasn't thinking. He was searching for a matching sentence. After a minute, he said, frustrated, I know this. My mind is just blank. That moment is the difference between a vocabulary bank and a mental model. Here's the contrast. Memorization is cue dependent. Understanding is cue independent. When you memorize, you tie an answer to the specific way you saw it. The same heading, the same phrasing, the same example, the same sequence of steps. Your brain becomes good at one thing, matching the prompt to the stored phrase. But an exam, an interview, or real life doesn't promise to use your prompts. Under stress, your attention narrows, your working memory gets noisy, you stop exploring and start hunting, you try to recall the right line instead of reasoning from the idea, and if the question is even slightly twisted, new numbers, new context, combined topics, your matching system struggles. That's why top students can feel anxious even when they study for hours. They sense that their knowledge only works in one costume. Another contrast that matters is speed versus depth. School rewards speed, fast recall, fast writing, fast completion. Speed feels like intelligence because it looks confident from the outside. But speed can be a trap. If you build knowledge like a set of isolated facts, you can retrieve some of them quickly until something demands connection. Then speed turns into panic. You can't reason with fragments. Real understanding builds depth first. Speed shows up later as a side effect, like muscle memory. It's not slow forever. It's slow early, so it can be fast later. There's also a format prison that few students notice. If you always learn in one format, bullet notes, flashcards, past papers, you become good at that format, not the subject. You learn the exam's accent, not the language. So the question is, what kind of learning survives pressure? Pressure-proof knowledge has 3 signs. You can start from different places. If you forget one step, you can rebuild it. You can generate examples, not just recognize them. You can predict. You can say, if this changes, that will happen, and explain why. Prediction is the opposite of memorization. Memorization repeats the past. Understanding can handle the future. Here's a simple way to test whether you have memorization or understanding before the exam exposes you. The variation drill. 60 seconds. Take one concept you studied today and force one change. Change the context. Textbook example, your life, a news story, a job scenario. Change the numbers. If it's math, pick new values and see if the method still works. Reverse it. Ask, what if the opposite were true? Combine it. Connect it to a neighboring topic from the same chapter. Break it. Find an edge case where it might fail. If that single change makes your knowledge collapse, you didn't fail. You discovered that you learned the cue, not the concept. Now you know where to build. Think of it like navigation. A tourist memorizes a route, left at the statue, right at the cafe. A resident understands the map. When a street is closed, the tourist is lost. The resident reroutes. Exams and real problems are closed streets. Memorization is the route. Understanding is the map. And here's the good news. Maps can be built. They're not reserved for geniuses. They're built through specific behaviors, explaining, modeling, retrieving, done consistently. In the next section, I'll give you a method that actually works, 3 tools that turn any topic into a working mental model. Then lock it in so it stays accessible even when the question changes and the pressure rises. If memorization is a stack of flashcards, understanding is a machine you can operate. The goal isn't to store more pages. The goal is to build a mental model that still works when the question changes. Here's the method that actually works, and you can use it in any subject. It has 3 tools. Used together, they turn studying from passive intake into active construction. The contrast to keep in mind the whole time is simple. Input makes you feel smart. Output makes you become smart. Tool 1, the explain back drill. Own the idea in your words. Most students stop at recognition. They can read a paragraph and think, yeah, I get it. The explain back drill forces you to prove it. How to do it? 5 minutes. Pick one concept. Close your notes. Explain it out loud in plain language as if you're helping a friend who missed class. Anytime you use a technical term, immediately translate it into everyday words. That last step matters because jargon can hide confusion. Plain language exposes it. A friend of mine studied programming. He could define recursion perfectly. But when I asked him to explain it without the word recursion, he stumbled. After a few minutes, he finally said, it's when a process uses a smaller version of itself until it reaches a stop point. The moment he said that, his face changed. He wasn't repeating anymore, he was seeing it. Gap-finding add-on, 1 minute. When you finish, write 3 lines. I understand. I'm fuzzy on. My question is, those 3 lines are your real syllabus. Not the chapter. Not the whole unit. Your actual weak points. Contrast frame. Repeating definitions versus revealing gaps. Now, explanation is powerful, but it can still be smooth and shallow. You can sound confident while being confused. So the second tool forces structure. Tool 2, the model and example ladder. Turn knowledge into a working map. A model is just a simplified how it works. It can be a diagram, a flowchart, a cause and effect chain, a timeline, or even an analogy. The point is that the idea becomes something you can run, not just repeat. The ladder, 10 minutes, model. What are the moving parts and how do they interact? Normal example. Where does this show up in a typical question? Real life example. Where does this show up outside school? Edge case. When does the idea feel like it might break? Anti-example. What is a common confusion and why is it wrong? That sequence builds flexibility. It's the opposite of memorizing one polished paragraph. Let's do a worked example with a topic many students memorize wrong. Opportunity cost. Model. Every choice trades one option for another. The cost is the best alternative you give up, not the money you pay. Normal example. You spend 2 hours studying. The opportunity cost might be the game you didn't play or the work shift you didn't take. Real life example. You accept a job offer. The opportunity cost is the best other job you could have taken, plus the time you could have used to learn a new skill. Edge case. You choose between 2 enjoyable things, both free. The opportunity cost still exists. You gave up the other experience. Anti-example. Opportunity cost equals total cost. No. Now you can answer weird questions, not just definitions. If someone asks what's the opportunity cost of taking a nap, you can handle it. Your model produces answers. Contrast frame, knowing the sentence versus running the concept. If you're stuck building a model, use these 3 prompts. What causes what changes what stays the same. Those questions pull structure out of chaos. But even with explanation and models, there's a final problem. Forgetting. Understanding fades if you never retrieve it. That's why the third tool matters. Tool 3, the active recall loop. Make memory a side effect. Most students review by rereading. It feels safe, it feels familiar, it feels like progress, but familiarity is not recall. Active recall is uncomfortable because it shows you the truth, what you can actually produce without help. The loop 10 minutes. Write 5 questions from today's material. Make them meaning questions, not vocabulary prompts. Bad, define osmosis. Better. Why do fingers wrinkle in water? Close your notes and answer from memory. Check and correct. Re-answer the same questions tomorrow in half the time. Add spacing so it sticks. Day 1, learn plus recall. Day 2, recall. Day 4, recall. Day 7, recall. This isn't magic. It's training. You are teaching your brain this matters enough to retrieve. A student I coached used to spend hours rewriting notes. She felt productive, but forgot everything within a week. When she switched to recall questions, she felt worse at first. I'm failing, she said. She wasn't failing. She was finally measuring the right thing. 2 weeks later, her confidence went up because she could actually answer questions without staring at the page. Contrast frame, rereading, input comfort versus retrieval, output strength. Combine the tools, the 20-minute meaning session. If you want one repeatable routine that beats memorization, do this. Explain back, 5 minutes. Speak the idea simply, find the fog. Model an example ladder, 10 minutes. Build the map and stress test it. Active recall, 5 minutes. Write 3 5-meaning questions and answer them closed book. Do that consistently and your study time becomes smaller but sharper. You stop collecting information and start building usable knowledge. And notice what we did. We didn't add more hours. We changed the direction from passive to active, from labels to meaning, from looking smart to being able. Now one objection remains, this sounds great, but I have multiple subjects, deadlines, and I can't study all day. Good, because the next section is not another method. It's the simplest upgrade plan, how to use these tools in a realistic week, how to prepare for exams without burnout, and how to become the kind of student who can handle new questions instead of fearing them. Here's the mistake ambitious students make. They treat studying like a marathon of hours instead of a cycle of outputs. They grind, they reread, they rewrite, and they feel busy. Then the exam twists a question, and the confidence disappears. So let's make this realistic. Your goal isn't to study more. Your goal is to run the method on a schedule you can actually follow. Start with the simplest weekly plan. Today, 20 minutes per topic. Do 1 meaning session. Explain back for 5 minutes. Build the model and example ladder for 10. Active recall for 5. Stop. Don't keep reviewing just to feel safe. This week, 3 short passes. Pass 1. Build models for the hardest concepts first. Pass 2. Turn each model into 5 meaning questions. Pass 3. Do spaced recall on day 2, day 4, day 7. Before the exam, 48-hour rule. No more passive rereading. Only outputs. Explain back, variation questions, and recall sets. If you can't produce it, you don't own it yet. A friend of mine was the kind of student teachers called slow, not because she was unintelligent, but because she refused to bluff. If she didn't understand, she asked why, and that made her look behind. When she switched to this approach, her study hours dropped, but her results climbed. The change wasn't mysterious. She stopped collecting sentences and started building models. She wasn't faster, she was deeper, and depth became speed. That's the final contrast. Top students chase certainty. Real learners build resilience. Certainty depends on familiar questions. Resilience survives unfamiliar ones. So here's your checklist. If you do nothing else, do this. Can I explain it without the textbook's vocabulary? Can I draw a simple model on a blank page? Can I give a real-life example in an edge case? Can I answer 5 meaning questions closed book? Can I handle 1 variation without panicking? If yes, you're not prepared in the emotional sense. You're prepared in the mechanical sense. You can produce. And if you're thinking, why didn't anyone teach this in school? You're not alone. The system rewards labels because labels are easy to grade. Meaning is harder. But you don't need permission to learn the right way. Quick recap. Memorization is cue-dependent. Understanding is model-based. The method is explain back, model ladder, active recall. Now I want to hear from you. What subject have you been memorizing without truly understanding? And what's one concept you want to be able to explain in plain words?